The MLB offseason is now officially upon us as the evil empire, the Dodgers, went back-to-back as World Series champions. But that means now we can officially talk some offseason baseball. In light of our conversation with Jeff Jones last week and some different reportings come out, we're going to start doing a little bit of a preview today of what free agency could look like for the Cardinals, what the trade market could look like, and just start to unravel what will be a really interesting offseason both for the Cardinals and Major League Baseball on this episode of Deal on the Cards. Welcome in, Josh and Andrew. We're missing Sandy today, but excited to have a conversation about MLB free agency, trade market, offseason. We don't need to talk about the Dodgers from last night because I'm so heartbroken. No, I'm just kidding. That was one of the best World Series games I've ever watched. It was, I'd still say Game 6 of 11 was my favorite World Series game, and I don't even feel like, I was looking at some stuff last night where people are posting best World Series game ever. And I feel like, obviously a lot of Cardinal fans would comment it, but I would see a lot of just baseball fans bring up 2011. And then obviously 2016 when the Cubs won that Game 7 over the Guardians. Obviously didn't like the result, but a great iconic game. Andrew, as an Ohtani enjoyer last night, we can make this brief because I know people are here for the Cardinal offseason stuff, but just kind of what were your thoughts watching the game? How nervous were you when Bichette went up 3-0 on Ohtani and they pulled him?
I don't know. At this point, he didn't really show up in the start. He was starting on short rest for the first time in his career, and then he didn't look good in the first 2 innings. He danced out of trouble, and they ran him out there for a little bit too long, in my opinion. So I didn't like the planning there, the usage by Dave Roberts, but somehow it ended up working out for the Dodgers, which at the end of the day, I'm not gonna run into some of these commenters that I've seen on some of our stuff, so I'm not gonna fuel that fire. But I had a fun night.
All right, well, you and the Dodger fans had a fun night. Everyone else, not so much, but that's okay. We're here to talk about MLB offseason chatter. Obviously, the Cardinals are in a rebuild right now, and so, but as we talked about a little bit with Jeff Jones in that episode, like rebuild for the Cardinals is not a tank job. It's not tear down like the Houston Astros or Chicago Cubs did in the past, and where they basically tear it down to the absolute studs, trade away everyone, don't really spend any money, try to be terrible for like 3 or 4 years, and then build it up. This is more of a, hey, we're going to try and get value for the guys that we think are not a part of our timeline. But they can still be active in free agency, but obviously I don't think anyone should be expecting them to do a full reload. Like I'm seeing Uncle Ted putting here, like reload, not retool. I do, or reload, not rebuild. I do think this is a rebuild. I think it's pretty clear. It's not a tank job per se. And so, I'll reference our conversation with Jones last week, but I think people should go back and listen to it. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. I kind of want to, let's start by just setting the foundation of what we think this offseason will look like, Andrew, and then maybe we can talk about specifically within free agency, and then we can talk about some of the different kinds of scenarios that could be out there. But Andrew, what is your expectation for the Cardinals in terms of how they're going to play in free agency? Not all the options, but what do you think is going to happen? Then we can talk about how there are multiple routes this could go depending on how the market flows.
Yeah, I think it will depend largely on how the market goes, and I don't think the Cardinals are going to be, the ones to set the market. I think other teams are going to have their go first in a lot of these free agents. I think, like Jeff said when we talked to him last week, it's going to be, can they sign one of these guys that maybe their market doesn't go the way they would expect, and we've seen this with a lot of players in the last few years, and they have to settle for like a 1-year deal, whether that's like Alex Bregman doing that last year, which ended up really hurting the Cardinals with all the Nolan Arenado trade stuff, or we've seen guys have to settle, like Carlos Correa had to do that a couple of times. And, I don't think they're going to go after one of those big name position players. I don't think there's a lot of big name position players really to go around this offseason anyway. But I could definitely see that happening if the market doesn't pan out for one of these starting pitchers. And also, just trying to find these depth arms, right? Like Miles Michaelis officially no longer part of the 40-man roster as of today. And man, I really do not want to see him back next year. But baseball wise, it does make quite a bit of sense for the Cardinals to bring him back on like a $2-3 million deal, even though it was just so bad. I feel like fans might be a little bit more receptive to something like that if he's not making like 18, 19 million dollars, however much it was over the last few seasons, where that was just a horrible contract. But there are merits to having someone like that on your team, when you're not trying necessarily to be in World Series contention. The one thing I do want to bring up from this World Series that we kind of, not Dodgers wise, but I think a lot of people might point to the Blue Jays as, and I think we might see this a lot this offseason with Cardinal fans, is that the Blue Jays finished in last place last year in their division. And people might point to the Cardinals and try to say, like, fans might point to them and try to say, well, why don't the Cardinals try to do that, right? And respectfully, like, I want to get ahead of that because I see some of that chatter, I think, already with some of the free agent names. And yeah, I've already seen it. Already have seen a comment in the chat about the Blue Jays, and maybe doing that with the Cardinals and the Rangers from 3 years ago, in 2023, winning the World Series, and the 2023 Diamondbacks. Like all these teams, and I don't really know how to put it in the sense other than, like, even though the Blue Jays finished in last year, it was a different kind of team finishing in last, where they have Vladimir Guerrero and Bo Bichette and Kevin Gausman and all of these guys that, and the Orioles did that too, right? Like, I'm seeing this in the chat again. The Cardinals don't have that. The Orioles had like 4 or 5 super prospects. The Cardinals have one of those. And the rest, you really don't know what you're going to get out of them. Like, is it possible the Cardinals make the playoffs next year? I'm not ruling it out. But to say that, like, you can go from where the Blue Jays were last year, I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think the Blue Jays really added that much to their team. Like, they signed Max Scherzer. They extended Vlad, but he was already on the team, so that doesn't really count towards this year. I don't really see how that's going to happen. But just to get ahead of that, really quick, and Santander, but like, he was bad and hurt, and he didn't play in the postseason, so I don't get that. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people understand they're not.
Yeah.
This is not the same as the Orioles.
This is not
the
the
Rangers,
season. Like, we're not going to be making
so.
those kinds of moves this offseason. And it's not that kind of roster.
Yeah, and again, I think most people agree with you on that. I think where people maybe have a question or are maybe going back and forth about what could happen is, so the Cardinals clearly also believe that. I mean, Bloom's just using this language, right? Like, the Blue Jays didn't think they were 5 years away going into this offseason. The other people didn't have expectations for them. I don't know if they would have necessarily thought they were World Series contenders, but they're definitely pushing for that. Same with the Rangers a few years ago. The Orioles wanted to be good. The Cardinals understand this is a long-term plan. And so there is no, like, hey, how do we push to make – it doesn't mean they can't be competitive in 2026, but there's not a push to be a World Series contender next year. But how aggressive do they play on the market if opportunities present themselves? And I think that's the real question mark this offseason, is whether or not the Cardinals can reload their rotation with some interesting arms that maybe are not getting the kind of deals they thought they would get or want to get in a pre-CBA market. And so, like, Jeff Jones brought up, like, what if Dylan Cease doesn't get the money he wants? What if Framber Valdez doesn't get the money he wants? I mean, Zach Gallen's a really interesting name where it's like, what is his market going to look like? Ranger Suarez, I feel like, is going to get a market, but like, what if he doesn't get the market he wants to? Are the Cardinals going to be that team who's willing to pony up and give a $26 million a year 1 year contract to Cease or Valdez, or like a $20 million contract to Zach Gallen, to bring them into the fold for the rotation and be able to flip them at the deadline? Or maybe it goes well and they extend them beyond next year. Like, are they willing to play in that kind of waters, or what will it take to get to that kind of waters? I don't think a Jeff Jones would bring that up. I've seen Feinstein link the Cardinals to a couple names, which I don't think he does that kind of stuff without at least something. Like, Jim Bowden's the one who kind of link anyone to anyone and just throw out ideas. So like, when he throws one, it's like, oh, that's interesting to think through, but doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot there. But I really do think the Cardinals are in a position, really interesting, to strike like the Giants did with Blake Snell, or the A little different with the Diamondbacks when you get Jordan Montgomery but they could be one of those teams that provides or the Minnesota Twins of Carlos Correa the first time around where he didn't get the long-term deal. Could they be that team that falls in line for that? And so I guess to your point, we won't know until the market plays out. Like if everyone needs pitching, and so there's definitely a world where this market just goes and is sending out long-term deals for all these guys, and they all get what they're looking for. Or again, if the Cardinals are knocking, offering you a 1-year deal, and the Padres are offering you a 1-year deal, like a guy who's interested in contending probably wants to end up in San Diego next year rather than St. Louis. So there's things out of the Cardinals' control with that. But I just have a feeling there's going to be a name or two out there by the end of November into December, January, where we're like, all right, should the Cardinals strike on X? Like we just don't know who that name is yet. Could it be Valdez? Could it be Cease? Could it be Gallen? Could it be Suarez? Could it be Michael King? Who knows? But I guess we'll just have to see how things play out. I'm curious. I personally think I'm interested if you agree with this. I don't know if they do it without moving both Arenado and Gray. I think that's part of what opens them up to the opportunity to do that is that they move enough money, then they're able to kind of get interesting with something. Because then you get a little bit of value for Gray, you get a little bit of value for Arenado, or basically no value for Arenado. And then you bring in that Zach Gallen type. And if he has a really good first half, the Cardinals are in contention, great. You have a guy who replaced Sonny Gray. And if not, then you have a guy you can flip at the deadline to a contender who needs a high-end starting pitcher. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's a world where even if one of those guys is still on the roster, they potentially could play in that water? Because right now they just have 3 guaranteed contracts under the books besides the ARB guys.
I think if Sonny Gray stays on the team, I think they could still make something happen. It's only a 1-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot of money, but like that's been deferred and like things have that contract is structured really oddly where they really didn't pay Sonny Gray much over the last couple of seasons. So like this is time to pay him, I guess. Like I don't think that would really affect how those numbers work out. And with luxury tax and salary and payroll and stuff, I'm pretty sure that they would have calculated it the way that it was like AAV wise with Sonny Gray, where they would be comfortable, paying him that much and then still adding another starter. They're losing they're losing a couple arms if Gray is gone, so I think they would need to replenish that with at least one. And then you don't really know. You need depth, right? You didn't have a single starting pitching injury this year, and Palante was terrible. Liberatore kind of, you don't know if he's necessarily going to give you that same output next season. McGreevy was good, but like those are, I don't know, 3 number 4 starters at best, I would say. And then like Michaelis isn't coming back, hopefully. I don't know. I could see them doing that. Honestly, I think they are probably going to sign 2 starters this season, especially if they move on from Sonny Gray, just because they're going to need that. And there's some, like they might go and get a Zach Gallen type at some point this offseason, but I don't think that rules them out from getting like a Lance Lynn type as well. Like a guy with like a smaller contract.
Like Miles Michaelis.
Yeah, like Miles Michaelis. Again, there's a couple NPB arms that are coming back to the U.S. Not that one, but 2 other ones that I think they could look at. Because they tend to like playing in that market. And I feel like that's kind of smart because a lot of those guys go over there, they change their mix, they're different pitchers. And, most of them don't stay good, but a lot of them have a good first season. And I could see them doing what the White Sox did with Eric Fetty a couple years ago and stealing some prospects from some poor team. And Uncle Ted talks about Miyagi every single time he's in the chat, and I can confidently tell you that he's not going to be posted because I think he's only 23.
But like to your point about like they need multiple starters, I think obviously we'd all love them to see go get that upside arm or multiple upside arms, but I think there makes a lot of sense if you don't want to block opportunities from the unarms to get. Let's just keep using Zach Gallen as the type. You get one Zach Gallen, and then you bring in the Miles Michaelis type, where it's like, hey, if Quinn Matthews is ready to take that spot in camp, then you have no problem bumping Miles Michaelis from that group and DFAing him or putting him in the bullpen or whatever it is. And I guess if it's a guy you want some bullpen flexibility, maybe it's more of a Steven Matz type. Like, again, doesn't have to be Steven Matz, but like one of those guys that can play both ways. Because if you assign 2 starters that you like want to guarantee a roster spot or a rotation spot to, so it's those 2 plus McGreevy plus Libby and Palante and then Matthew, like it gets, and then Leahy wants to like is going to have an opportunity. You could see how you block opportunities again, like you did with McGreevy last year. And so I don't think they want to get into that realm, but I do think they want to have potential innings. Redbird Farmhands, I mean, I think it's a good point here. Like you could also go after a minor league deal. It's like maybe they bring back Chris Taylor, Zach Plesac type, people like that. I mean, we keep throwing out the typical names, but like there's, Chris Taylor.
Chris Taylor would be, that would be.
My brain was obviously being weird there. But there are other upside arms that I think you could do other than Zach Gallen. Because I think everyone just throws out Zach Gallen and Dylan Cease and stuff like that. But like, what about Lucas Giolito? What about Merrill Kelly? Merrill Kelly doesn't fit that actually, but more of like Brandon Woodruff or Tyler Malley or everyone talks about the Max Scherzer thing, but I think he's going to a contender. I don't think he's coming to St. Louis, but maybe like there are arms like that you could be really interesting with. That could have bounce back seasons. Like Tyler Malley, when he's healthy, is a really good pitcher. Like, do you do Dustin May, where it's like, I don't know how many contending rotations want to roll out Dustin May next year, but like the Cardinals can afford to do it. I'd be fine. I mean, I'm not saying it's gonna be good, but like I'd like stuff. It's like, I mean, I'd rather try that than do Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson again. Like I'd much rather do Dustin May plus Miles Michaelis than Miles Michaelis and Chris Bassett. Even though Chris Bassett could be decent, right? Shane Bieber, like I mean, there's just enough names out there that most of these guys I think are going to go to contenders. I think most of them are priced themselves out of St. Louis, but it's just which of these guys potentially falls through the cracks in the market and potentially can get that deal. Because I mean, obviously everyone thinks about the trade chip, but also there's a world too where the Cardinals again are interesting in 2026. By the time whether it's 2027 or 2028 when they can play again, they think they're close. Like then they might want to extend Dylan Cease or extend Zach Allen or something like that, right? There's just interesting ways to do it. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how they play when it comes specifically to the rotation options because they clearly do want to add guys. Before, because I do want to at some point was transition the conversation to there's some interesting stuff from MLB Trade Rumors today about the top trade candidates in the offseason. The Cardinals have like 7 names on the list, and it's really interesting. But I want to ask you a little bit about the trade market. I've heard people talk about the idea they could acquire arms with control. Personally, I don't really see how they do that this offseason unless it's a prospect, because I think it would be ludicrous to trade Brendan Donovan right now for a cost-controlled major league ready arm, because that guy, like guy with major league experience, because like the Mariners aren't giving you Bryce Miller or Brian Wu or George Kirby or Logan Gilbert for Brendan Donovan. A team would give you like a Michael McGreevy type or I don't like some back end of the rotation with control. Like, I'm sorry, but like there's no way the Twins do Brendan Donovan for Joe Ryan. Like they're trying to rebuild. And I'm not saying Uncle Ted's saying that's the only like part of the package, but like I just don't see a world where Mitch Keller, like why would the Pirates want Brendan Donovan? Like I just don't see one of those guys being the guy, and I don't see them taking prospects right now to go acquire that guy either. So I just don't see how that kind of deal happens this offseason. In the future, yeah, that's great stuff to explore. So personally, I just don't really see the world where they upgrade the rotation through the trade market unless it's acquiring another prospect. Do you think I'm wrong on that at all?
Yeah, I don't really see where that's coming from. Acquiring a cost-controlled starter, I don't know where they would get the resources to get that, unless it's like literally swapping Lars Nootbaar for like Bobby Miller or something like that, which I wouldn't do because Bobby Miller's been terrible. And Lars Nootbaar, I mean, like we don't know if he'll ever play again, but like
he'll play again.
Or like with the contract, like he might not play this year like very much at all, and then the next year if there's a lockout, then you just lose Lars Nootbaar. Like I don't really know what's going to happen with him, what his future looks like. But I still wouldn't do anything like that. Maybe like a Nolan Gorman for like somebody. I don't. I don't know, like Nolan Gorman could
No,
get
I think Gorm is interesting. Gorm is the kind of guy that maybe you swap, change of scenery arms
yeah,
where
like
like
maybe
it's
that would
someone
work.
else's starter that's not really worked out and you're bat and we're
Yeah,
trying things out. So yeah, that's interesting. But it's
like I
not, but
could see
that's not
that
again, that's
happening.
not those high end control arms that people talk.
Yeah, like if the Angels finally want to give up on Reed Detmers, then yeah, maybe. Like that's a trade scenario that's been thrown out a lot. I still think it would probably take a little bit more than Nolan Gorman because Nolan Gorman has shown you absolutely nothing in the last 2 seasons. That he can stay consistently hitting well and stuff like that. So I don't know if that necessarily would even get the job done, but there's things like that that I think are like interesting and could happen, but that's not what people are necessarily going to be excited about. I think the ship has sailed for Lars Nootbaar for even what is it like Bryce Miller was the thing like that would have been a
I
great
mean,
trade a couple years ago,
a
and
long time ago, but
or
not
like Lars
anymore.
Nootbaar for Alejandro Kirk, which that would have been nice too.
I mean, I guess the other way you could do it, like, but I just don't see a team doing it. Is like if you look bring up that scenario, it's like, yeah, Lars straight up for that is not going to happen anymore. But like, can you package multiple guys together, like Burleson and Lars and other that's where you can maybe do something like that. And like, of course, Heim should try these things. Like, I mean, go ahead and see if the Mariners want to trade you one of those arms. I'm just telling, like, that's probably not going to happen. Like, they didn't do it in those other years when Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar was more highly valued. Brendan Donovan had more control. So I highly doubt that they're going to do it when those starters have shown even more potential and the Cardinals bats have fallen off more. So, but who knows? I mean, they could. I think it's more prospects than it is a controlled arm because at that point, like, it's like if you're going to trade Brendan Donovan, I'm maximizing his value for future value, not like part of what you're paying, like the cost of part of the why those young arms are so hard to acquire is because you're acquiring the cheap year that 2026 would be. And so it's like the Cardinals are wasting that value because they don't really need that cheap arm, the high level cheap arm. So I'd rather be acquiring a prospect at that point than paying up for a lesser arm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I also think like the Cardinals pitching right now obviously is in a really bad place, but if you look at what's going on down in the farm system, there's a lot to be encouraged by. I think Heim, I trust him to do a good job. I think pitching wise, especially the teams that he and Serfolio and a lot of the guys they brought in the organization have developed, definitely very encouraging. They just added more guys to their player development system, so I wouldn't even be that worried about getting that guy right now. Who knows, that maybe that's what Liam Doyle turns into in a year or two. And like, there's definitely guys that come out of nowhere, right? Like, there's a lot of guys that can develop things really quickly. Like, if the Cardinals pitching lab ends up being a success, there could be some guys, some prospects that we're not even talking about finding a new pitch and just gaining gaining another gear. And I think that's something that goes overlooked. And I don't think that if the Cardinals are trying to contend in 26, or not, if they're not trying to contend in 26, I would say that that's not necessarily on my priority list. Like, I would go out and shop these guys and try to get what you can get for them, but I'm not going to try to get someone who's major league ready and ready to make an impact next year. Right? I don't think that's necessary at all.
Yeah. Yep. So I agree on that. So let's do a couple of our sponsors real quick here, and then let's talk about the trade market because I do think it's interesting. And obviously, right now we're just kind of spitballing what things can happen, but I expect over the next few days we're going to get more reporting from Katie, from Derek, from Jeff, from Denton about what they're hearing. And so, because I remember like 2 years ago, this time going into the 2024 offseason, Gould put out this big piece about like they're very interested in Sonny Gray, Tyler Glasnow, someone they'd be interested in trading for. Aaron Nola, they would like you start to hear the names that internally they're already starting to look at. Now this year might be a little bit different because it's so up in the air whose market's going to fly around in which directions. But again, I think we'll have some real tangible names that we can start actually discussing here soon. But as always, I want to thank 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles for their support of the podcast. So the presenting sponsor of the Cards podcast. They're located at 9640 All Boulevard in Olivet. Open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and 10 to 4 on Saturdays and Sundays. They buy, sell, and trade all sports cards and Pokemon cards. They have the newest selections of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars from around the league. make sure you go check them out. We're going to be there live for the charity live stream, which I don't think we've talked about on the podcast yet. We're hosting with Brendan Donovan this year. We're raising money for the Kaufman Fund, who Brendan partners with. So very grateful to partner with Brendan Donovan on the charity stream this year. And then we'll have a bunch of guests like usual. We'll be able to announce more soon. And very excited about the lineup that we're building for that. So hopefully you guys will check that out and also come join us in person if you're in the St. Louis area at 314. We'll do giveaways as well as usual. And if not, obviously you can join us on the channel. So very excited to be a part of that with Brendan this year. And then we also want to tell you about our other sponsor, and that's Underdog Sports.
The Deal on the Cards podcast is proud to be partnered with Underdog Sports, our favorite place to play fantasy games. You're now eligible to play in Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, and 37 other U.S. states. You got to check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. You just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can win 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. If that sounds like fun, sign up with our promo code CARDS to claim your first free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries.
All right, Andrew, I was popping over. MLB Trade Rumors does 2 really good. I mean, they do a lot of stuff for offseason. It's great. Like the arbitration projections are awesome. They do usually like a free agent predictions one where they kind of predict the contract, but they do a pretty good job of being in the ballpark on, and then like teams that are interested in the team they think they'll go to. But then they also always do this trade candidates thing where they rank them 1 through 40 this year based on it's a mixture of value and availability. It's like Tarek Skubal was ranked 40th, but it's because they just don't think he's going to be traded. So it's like, obviously it's not the 40th player available. It's just that they're like, it's probably not going to happen. Their number 3 player on the board is Brendan Donovan in terms of value and availability. Number 5 is Sonny Gray. And then you drop all the way down to 23 was Jojo Romero. 30th was Gorm. Arenado is the 34th player, and Contreras is 35th. Obviously, I think Contreras would be a lot higher if they thought he was going to get moved. Gorm's in a really interesting spot. But like, they're pretty confident that there's a good mix of both trade value and availability when it comes from Brendan Donovan and Sonny Gray. Obviously, we talked about Jeff Jones in our last episode. Again, plug in that. I definitely recommend. It's super relevant still. So if you didn't listen to it, go back and listen. But Brendan Donovan definitely seems like, well, the Cardinals must hate charity because it sounds like they're going to be trading Brendan Donovan, and we love Brendan Donovan. I really hope they find a way to extend him and keep him. If they're not going to extend him, sure, you should trade him, but he should be a Cardinal here for a long time. But I do think MLB Trade Rumors is right in reflecting that out of guys who actually will be available this offseason, he's going to be one of the most valuable guys in the trade market. And they seem to really think Sonny Gray is a guy that carries value. Like, obviously, his contract makes things really complicated. And so it's not as simple as if he was making 10, 15, 20, even 25 million next year. But he's a guy that teams are going to want, even though that the regular what's the word I'm looking for? Like the standard numbers weren't that great for him last year. He's a good pitcher still, and the underlying metrics are still really good. And like they were talking about, like if he was a free agent this offseason, he's probably looking at more of like a $25 million a year contract. So you're talking about a guy who's about 10 million overpaid right now, not like a ton. And if you're talking in a market too, where teams might be hesitant to give long-term deals out, if the Cardinals pay down 10, 15 million of that, like it's a pretty good starter that's available. So I don't know. Are you confident that the Cardinals can get real value? Let's talk about the Sonny Gray thing. Do you think the Cardinals can get more value for Sonny Gray than people are maybe letting on so far?
Yeah, I do think it entirely depends on how much money they're willing to eat in the contract, right?
For
like, and I think they should eat money on the contract because they didn't pay him what his AAV over the last couple of seasons, right? Like they backloaded the contract. I have no idea why they did that. I think that was kind of dumb on their part, especially because they didn't really spend that money after they signed him. Like in 2024, after they signed him, they totally could have gone out and added more with the money that they ended up deferring from the Sonny Gray contract. And then, maybe you don't have to trade for Eric Fedde, and maybe 2025 also goes differently. And like, there's a lot of things we can look at there. So I think it's fair, right? Like in terms of luxury tax, it will only be 25. So if you're going to trade him to a team that is looking at pushing that threshold, that definitely would be a benefit to them. But, we've seen teams in the past go out and kind of buy prospects. So the Rangers did that, or the Mets did that when they traded Max Scherzer to the Rangers and Justin Verlander back to the Astros. Like that was the thing that they were able to do. Obviously, I don't think the DeWitts are going to be willing to eat nearly as much of their contracts as the Mets were, just ownership wise and how these things go. But with the amount of payroll the Cardinals are going to have next year, I don't really think it matters at this point, because you're going to have a significantly lowered payroll. You're going to have a lot more money to work with. And I would much rather spend that money buying prospects than signing somebody, like signing another reliever to a $2 million deal or something like that. When you could go out and get some value. I don't think he's going to get you like a top 100 guy, but I think he could definitely get you some things to bolster the depth of the system. And I don't really know how many more top prospects the Cardinals really need to go out and get before they're ready to contend again, because you have JJ there. He's a top 5 prospect in all of baseball. Liam Doyle just got with your 5th overall pick. If the Cardinals get a good pick in the lottery this year, they're going to add another guy to that mix. Raniel Rodriguez, top 100 guy. Like I think they're close to having that system where you also need those supplemental depth pieces as well. So I think you could get those for Sonny Gray if you can eat some of the contracts. Maybe like for $20 million, you could go out and get somebody that is a lot more intriguing. And then also you're going to have other pieces too. Like if you end up trading Donovan, which I would be really sad. I understand why that needs to be done, but if they can't get an extension done, but like you're going to get a lot of value, and I don't think Sonny Gray is necessarily going to get you or is going to necessarily need to get you the biggest package this offseason. But it definitely, I could see it being more than we would have expected going into this offseason.
Yeah, because I think it's pretty easy to look at a scenario where, let's say they only cut 10 or eat $10 million of Gray's deal. Say they have to eat about 15 of Arenado's deal. Like you're putting them under that point, $100 million payroll at that point. And so obviously they're looking to cut payroll again here, but like compared to where their opening day payroll was this past year, oh man, I can't find the actual. So their end of season payroll in 2024 was 183. Their payroll for 2025 ended up being estimated about 144, and they're already getting close to 100. So they're already dropping like 100 again, or sorry, not 100 again, like 40 again. So yeah, I feel like I think the best case scenario, obviously, first and foremost, what they need to do is what Bloom's been desiring to do, right? Is invest in the infrastructure, invest in the player development, invest in the minor league levels in the ways he wants to. But then whatever funds he has left over, if you can do a mixture of, like, what if you swap Nolan Arenado with another bad contract from another team and eat money, and you get a player, a prospect? Like you said, you're buying a prospect, or you're eating a ton of money on Arenado's deal to buy a prospect. What if you, like you said, eat money on Gray's deal to buy a prospect, and you go out and sign one of those starters that's sitting around in free agency that doesn't get the deal they want, and you could potentially flip that guy at the deadline for more prospects. And you add then like a couple cheap relievers in the Phil Maton or mold where it's $2, $3, $4 million, and you hope for the best, but if they don't work out, it's whatever. And you get one small free agent starter like Miles Michaelis to fill out the rotation. I feel like that's a really nice offseason if you bought prospects basically, or you bought more value on the guys you're trading away. You sign one of those guys that doesn't get the money they need or that they're hoping for in free agency, and then you fill out the rest of the money you have left over with that random arm that you could move out of the rotation if you have a young arm you want to pitch over them, and some bullpen arms. Obviously I would prefer to extend and keep Brendan Donovan, but then if you trade him, obviously you need to maximize value on that. I do think there's an interesting world with that. What I am really curious to see is how both free agency and the trade market develop. And I could see this being a kind of a slow offseason of seeing who blinks first on stuff. Because I can see the trade market taking a while to move because there's a lot of free agents out there. I can also see teams turning to the free trade market because they're hesitating to play in the free agent market. So like, is a Sonny Gray deal, like, is the winter meetings when that goes down? Does it take longer? How long does it take for Nato to be moved? Like, is there a deal in December again, like the Astros had, or does it take up till spring training again for that kind of stuff to happen? What kind of market would there be for a JoJo Romero out there? I think he's a guy that'd be great to trade if they could. Again, I think you should be actively shopping and aggressively shopping Wilson Contreras to see if there's a team that wants you to give good or wants to give you good value for him. And if there's good offer and he wants to go there, then do it. But if not, obviously you keep him in tow. But he's the other name I think just is really interesting for this offseason because Alec Burleson, like if you look at his offensive production, he was awesome at first base. He only played like 40 games there, but it's like a 140 WRC plus bat at first base. So if you can get him there, it also opens up opportunities in the outfield for other guys to play there. And maybe get some good value where Wilson's not a guy you should have to eat money on to get good value for. Yeah, it'll just be really interesting to see how that shapes up. I guess out of so there's Donnie, Gray, Romero, it's 3, Gorm 4, Nato 5, and Contreras 6. I think we can rule out Nootbaar at this point as a trade candidate. Out of those 6, how many do you think realistically get moved?
I don't know why they didn't trade Romero at the deadline. That was actually so bad. I don't understand that at all. But yeah, I would try to get what value can out of him. And trading relievers in the offseason is always tough because there's like 1,000 of those guys available on the open market. Yeah. And that was frustrating. Just to know that like the Cardinals were basically punting on the season. I would say Arenado's 100% gone. I would say Gray is probably like also gone. Romero, I don't really see a reason to keep him around. And then like one of the left-handed bats, I would say it's probably Donovan, which is unfortunate, but you know, I think Contreras will stay though. I don't see him wanting to leave, which is again a little bit odd why he enjoys being in St. Louis so much, but I guess you know,
yeah,
good for him, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so. Donnie, I think gets traded. Gray, I think gets traded. I actually think JoJo gets traded because I think Bloom is not going to make the same mistake where Mo did per se of like it's really risky to hold on to that reliever. But even with both Helsley, in my opinion, made more sense to hold on to him in the season than JoJo. I just think there's way more scenarios. It's like the Fetty thing. There are way more scenarios where he loses value than he gains value, even in an offseason where it's hard to trade him. So I think trading JoJo makes sense to me. Nato, I think's gone. So that's 4. And then actually, I'll say one of Gorm or Contreras are gone. So I'll say 5 of the 6. I think they're going to be active. I really do. I think Bloom's going to be decisive and try to move things around. And maybe it's a name not on that list that gets included in that, but I truly do think. I mean, again, I don't think they're bringing in top prospects for any of these guys, but I do think they want to add to their system and create more flexibility. And then if you're able to move a lot of that money, again, it allows you to play a little more free agency too. So we'll see what happens with all that. Any other things you want to hit with free agency or trades for this point? And hopefully by midweek, we've got some more reporting on maybe some names that they're already looking at.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting names out there. We'll probably do a deep dive into like exactly which ones. I want to see Heim move quickly. I want to see him do something within the first like couple weeks of the offseason just because, one, it's boring to sit here and wait. During the offseason, like there's nothing else going on for us. And also, you know, we went an entire offseason where they actually did nothing. And I think if you can, I don't know, make one of these smaller moves happen quickly, like if Sonny Gray is traded by like Thanksgiving, I think that would be great, right? Like I think that isn't that when they signed him? Like when all the Lynn Gibson and Sonny Gray stuff happened in that 1 week.
Yeah. But I do think it's obviously I agree with you that I would like it to go for them to be quick and decisive, but it's also gonna be hard where the market's just not moving and they might just have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, I think it would be very encouraging to see them do that though. Do that like very quickly. Because if you're waiting until like the holidays until like mid-December and stuff like that, and the Cardinals still haven't made like a single move, not even like signing a bargain bin reliever, I think that would definitely, just we've been told to have patience for so long that you can only really have it for that long. That like I think if Bloom can go out there and show us that he can get something done really quickly, and it doesn't have to be something big, it doesn't have to be moving Arenado right away. But just like something, I think it would help the fans stay engaged. I think it would show. I think it would show fans that this is going to be different than Mo, and I think that is what needs to happen.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that Jones brought up that I think is really interesting, and I'll say look out for, is a catcher trade too. I see that in the chat a little bit too. Like, I obviously I think Yvonne's here to stay. I doubt he's the guy that's dealt. But could Jimmy Crooks be on the move because you just don't really have room for him right now? Or Pedro Pais, one of those two guys. I think Bernal is the guy they probably hold on to too. But maybe, okay, so maybe that's the other scenario where they potentially do get a controllable arm and they make a move that we're like, oh, surprised the Cardinals went after Mitch Keller, Joe Ryan, whatever. Again, I think that's too high of a it's pie in the sky. But some interesting young controllable starter is that maybe they'd used Bernal to go do something like that plus other stuff. But we'll see. So I'm very interested to see how this offseason goes. Obviously, now we're getting into it. There's a few more days until the qualifying offers are due. It's 5 days after the World Series ends, and then free agency technically begins.
Qualifying offer? No.
Yeah, why didn't we do a full episode breaking down why Miles should get a qualifying offer?
If he had pitched every single inning like Sandy wanted when the Cardinals were done, honestly, I would be okay with that.
Paying him $20 million a year.
It saves you your entire bullpen.
Yeah. Wow. What a time. Anyways, well, appreciate the support as always. Like and subscribe helps channel a ton. There's that new hype button if you haven't seen that before in the video stuff, and it helps channels out as well. So if you want to hype our video, you can do 3 of those a week on your favorite creators, and so we appreciate that. But liking the video, obviously subscribing, commenting down below. Let us know your thoughts. We want to know what you guys are thinking. Give us your ideas of what you're thinking. We'll talk through them on future episodes. Always appreciate the support in the live chat if you're able to make it for those. And then again, remember, keep your circle your dates of December 16th, not 5 to 9 p.m. We'll have that charity stream with Brendan Donovan. Super exciting. And we'll have a bunch of other guests as well. So appreciate the support as always. Like and subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.